Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, the Witcher-themed card game, and today what we are going to do is some more of the Switcheroo seasonal event. Now, we of course did this previously, and it was absolutely insane, because it's an alternate game mode in which every time you and your opponents take a turn, you switch hands, which I was thinking to myself, how on earth do you make a deck that is specifically designed for just that? Because, of course, generally speaking, when you're making a deck, it is designed to build off of the cards that you have in your own deck, not the cards that your opponents are using. How could you ever predict that? So, then it occurred to me, well, there is one such type of deck that may be able to do just that, that being Nilfgaard Assimilate. So Assimilate is the ability that makes it such that cards get boosted by 1 whenever you play a card that is not in your starting deck. Normally, Assimilate decks would focus on creating a bunch of new cards that don't start off in your deck and you get boosted that way. However, when you play cards from your opponent's deck, those count as well. So in that way, every time we're playing a card from our opponent's deck, we are going to be boosting our Assimilate units. So what we have here are a bunch of Assimilate units in our deck. First and foremost will be this guy, because he himself is an Assimilate unit and creates a 1 power copy of a bronze unit in our starting deck. Most of those are guys like this, and this, and this, and this, all of which have Assimilate. So that's going to likely be our first turn play here. I don't think we want to have this, because this plays a card from our opponent's graveyard, and in the first round it's unlikely that there are going to be too many of those. Then I highly suspect that our opponent is going to want to play this guy as soon as we pass to them. So the thing that I've found with doing Switcheroo is that I tend to like to have one, and specifically just one, really strong card in our starting hand, because what that means is that as we're going first here, we can make a point of playing that card, and then when we swap hands with our opponent, that means that they're looking at a bunch of relatively average cards and they don't have an amazing card that they can play, because we had a few good cards there that we could have had, but I deliberately got rid of them so that when we pass over to our opponent, we'll have stuff that's not amazing. So let's start off with this guy. Now, our opponent is also Nilfgaard, and they have Imprisonment, which means they could lock and damage one of our units. They might very well do this to this guy here, but let's give it a shot. And so this is what I mean. We have a bunch of Assimilate units in our deck, so this guy was an Assimilate unit himself, and then he creates a 1 power copy of a unit from our starting deck. And let's actually boost that so that it's a little bit less easy to take out. But why we wanted to do this first was because it means that we have 2 Assimilate units out at the very beginning. And these guys, again, with Assimilate, get boosted every time we play a card that is not from our starting deck. And that does include cards from our opponent's deck. So we want to do that as soon as possible. And there we have our opponent already using at least 1 round of their leader ability, locking this guy here. So we will no longer have Assimilate, and he will no longer be able to damage a unit by 2. And they are also damaging our other unit here. Won't be... Oh, they're actually taking out the one that they locked? Okay, I was assuming they were going to attack this guy, but sure. So now we get to see what our opponent has. And let's take a look. So notably, this was actually a little bit of a misplay playing this guy in the melee row, because Nilfgaard does have access to this card here that deals 1 damage to an opposing card in the melee row. So I should have played him in the range row. We could, of course, play this right now and make up for that. But yeah, our opponent does have several very strong cards here. Notably, Ivo can deal damage fairly frequently. We probably do want to play that first. Otherwise, we could make a point of, playing these so that our opponent does not have the chance to play them. Ultimately, we will want to play the Emissary. Well, yeah, so let's do this here. We'll play in the melee row. We do need to play that in the melee row, because that is the only place where he'll be able to use his ability. So it does mean that we'll be more susceptible to our opponent using these guys in the future. And for our leader ability, we have the ability to play a card from our opponent's hand. So the reason why I think this is particularly good in this game mode is, well, we know what cards our opponent has in their hand. When they locked the unit that we just played, so they've used all of their leader ability. So I'm going to deliberately hold off on this. I like to try to save it for rounds 2 or 3 it's our way of getting a definitive advantage there, because I find that generally speaking, everyone is going to play all their cards in round 1, as we saw the first time we were doing Switcheroo. When you pass early, your opponent can continue to play cards, so it doesn't work out so well in that case, because you're not going to be saving cards when your opponent is playing your own cards. So let's play a spy here that will play a card from our opponent's deck. So normally it would be difficult to trigger Assimilate on our own turn, because these are all cards that were in our starting deck. But that is one way to make it happen, and admittedly I actually should have targeted this guy, because I deliberately went for the one that had the highest strength. However, that was a 5 strength unit, yes. This guy here is a 4 strength unit, which is a little bit worse. However, he does have the ability to deal 2 damage, so in total, he has 6 strength. Once you account for the amount of damage he deals, so should have gone for that. And once again, our opponent has taken out one of our units here. This guy is still unlocked and has Assimilate, so we do have that working in our favor. Now, as for other things, we do have our opponent with a lot of cards in their melee row, so although this is only a 4 strength unit, it would deal a fair bit of damage over time, so that could add up. I'm kind of eyeing that here. Otherwise, Geralt of Rivia, of course, only destroys a card with 9 or more strength, and our opponent might be thinking that they're deliberately leaving this card alone here because they're expecting him to continue to go up higher and might be Geralt of Rivia target in the not-so-distant future. Because, yep, every time we play one of their cards, we will go up by 1, and we're not that far away. We could actually, well, I would say we could do some math to figure out when exactly he will reach 9 strength and figure out, will we have Geralt of Rivia, or will our opponent have Geralt of Rivia at that point in time? However, it's not quite that simple, because there are some cards that will trigger 2 rounds of Assimilate on this guy here, and other cards that won't trigger any. Like these cards, if we play them on our turn, will still trigger Assimilate on our turn, which again, is normally difficult to do, because it creates a copy of one of our opponent's units, and they did that to create their own version of this unit that deals 1 damage against opponents in the melee row, and this, of course, will also lower this guy's value a bit, assuming that it doesn't just take out our Alba Pikeman. So, as for what we want to do here, we could put down more Assimilate units. Assimilate is strong at the beginning because that means you have more time to play more cards that are not from your starting deck, but as time goes on, there's less time to power them up, so they become a little bit less significant. And I think we do still want to play them now, in which case we'll just go for what the highest unit is, which would be either this one, well, any of a number of them. Do we want to Purify, or make one of our opponent's units a spying unit? Not sure it makes a huge difference. Let's play in the range row, and then it doesn't really matter who we make a spy. We don't have any setup for that at the moment. There is a card in our deck that is based on opponents being spies, but that's about it. We obviously don't have it in our hand right now. And our opponent does play the other card that deals damage to units in the melee row, so yes, we would have liked, like I said before, to have put this guy in a different row, but of course, but our version of this card does need to be there, so that wasn't going to change. As for what we do next, this card is actually a bit of a trap, because it boosts one of our units by 6, yes, but that is a guaranteed way of putting a target on that unit's head for Geralt of Rivia. So I think we might have a bit of a game of chicken here, trying to pass this hand back and forth, and not play the Emissary. Of course, there are 2 of them, so someone is definitely going to need to play one. I think what we do here is why don't we go with Impera Brigade. I'm assuming we have a soldier. Yes. So we do have another one of these in our deck, even though this is our opponent's hand. We have one of these in our deck as well. And make that 2 of them, because, again, that's the one that was from our opponent's deck, and we didn't have any of these in our hand to begin with, so they were both sitting in there ready to get drawn. So, turns out, strong 1-turn play, and that is actually enough for us to take a lead here, at least temporarily. Of course, we played 1 more card than our opponent. But, well, after they deal their damage in the melee row, they now take a 1-point lead here. This is another such card that, ideally, we would have 1 sitting in our deck and another that we can draw from our deck when we play it, except when we were redrawing some cards trying to get rid of the powerful ones so that our opponent wouldn't be able to play them, I think we might have drawn back into one of these, or we were not able to get rid of it, even if under other circumstances we would have liked to have done that. So we don't have great options here. I think We probably do still go for Assimilate because there's not much else for us to do. We are close to having the same amount of strength as our opponent here, so if we were to go with our leader ability, then we might be able to take this one, but I'm deliberately going to wait because our opponent has used their leader ability, so I think that will be a key distinction between us and our opponent in rounds 2 and or 3, is we will have that threat of being able to use that leader ability, whereas they will not. Which card did they just change into one of these slave infantries? I didn't catch it. It wasn't one of the melee damage ones. Interesting. Okay, so now this is where the issues start to come up. We either play Geralt of Rivia, and he has no one who has 9 or more strength to destroy, so he's just functionally a 3 strength card, which is not great. Or we play an Emissary, which does give us more power, yes. However, like I was saying before, does mean that we are going to make it so that our opponent is almost certainly going to use Geralt of Rivia in the next turn to take it out. But I don't think we have many other options. So I think we do go for this, and we'll play it here. And I think we want to boost a non-assimilate unit on the assumption that we want to keep all of our assimilate units alive and well. Because, again, this guy is likely toast now. Geralt will take him out next turn, once our opponent has this hand. I suppose we, depending on what we had in the melee row, might have been able to boost a melee card and hope that these guys would have dealt enough damage to drop it below 9 strength, but that was certainly not going to happen at this stage, when we already had a 4 strength unit there. So we have no option but to play Hunting Pack here. It's not going to do its special thing, because although there is at least one enemy with a status, we already have the other Hunting Pack in our hand right now, so that's not going to do anything, and we have a 1 power advantage right now, but of course, our opponents will take the lead from the melee damage alone, then add on top of that that they can play Geralt of Rivia here, as anticipated, and delete this card. And they certainly will retake the lead here. Now, we will be able to play the Emissary this time and safely boost a unit. No threat of Geralt destroying that card. But at this stage, we will not be able to take the lead in this round. So we'll pass here. Like I said, we're going to save our leader ability. Might have had the opportunity to take round 1 with it, but I think because our opponent used their leader ability so early, I like having the option of holding on to ours. And we will hope, of course, that we can still pull out a round 2 and round 3 victory. Now, okay, this is the card I was alluding to before that does specifically target spies. So we would like to have a way to create spies on our opponent's side, which we might be able to do with this guy, actually. Hold on just a second. Do you have any spies in your graveyard? You do not, actually. So, tell you what. No. This card is fairly powerful and then creates a weak unit in your deck, which is kind of nice for setup. Notably, at the moment, this doesn't have anything to set it up at all. So, although it is arguably, it definitely was the best card that we had there, we didn't have a way to make it happen. So, admittedly, also, our opponent just played some cards that... Actually, I take that back. I was going to say, for a second there, I thought they were about to play a card that we could have applied that, the card that we put back in our deck on. But mostly this is just a really strong card, and it's going to be really hard to come back from this. So, I think we will definitely want to play a card from our opponent's hand this time around. Otherwise, we are at risk of losing here, and of course if we lose round 2, then we are done. So, sure, we'll play one of these. It's not terribly strong. It gets boosted by 1 every time we play a unit with deploy. And of course it also triggered Assimilate on this guy here, because it's not from our starting deck, so gives us at least 1 more card to work with here, but we are still at a disadvantage. We have a little bit more potential for growth than our opponent does because we have Assimilate, whereas they do not. But that being said, we don't have a lot of time to take advantage of Assimilate, so that may not be enough of a difference maker here. And they will have the opportunity to play Cynthia, which was the highest base strength unit in our hand there. So not a big surprise to see them playing that. However, it does also have a deploy ability, and we are about to have two of these guys that get boosted whenever we play a card with deploy. So it would have been really nice if we were able to play this card on our next turn, but like I said, probably doesn't come as a huge surprise to see that they play it here. And it does look as though, of course, we'll play this, which was from our starting deck, and therefore will not trigger Assimilate. Nor does it have a deploy ability. Therefore, we will not trigger any of our boosting when we play this. And therefore, we will not win. So, as I said, deliberately was trying to hold on to our leader ability in hopes of being able to put it to good use there, but just didn't quite have the cards that we were looking for to play from our opponent's hand, because of course they had an amazing card to play on their first turn in round 2, but by the time they did that, there were mostly just slim pickings remaining, and it wasn't enough of a difference maker there. So we'll try this again, and let's see what we can do this time around. I do typically like playing against Nilfgaard when we are using an Assimilate deck, because, well, if they also are playing Assimilate, then there's a lot of potential for crazy boosting to happen. So we'll see if that happens this time. Other than that, I mean, Assimilate, as I was saying before, can work with just about anything, because it gets boosted off of playing our opponent's cards. And it is another Nilfgaardian opponent here.
Is not a virtue I am known to have.
So again, the hope here would be that our opponent is also going with Assimilate. So this is actually the card that our opponent played in the previous match that was so effective. It evolves at the end of each round. So, this is also a card that we might want to play here. Two very strong cards. I don't love having this. This is okay. I don't love having two strong cards because we'll play one. Our opponent is very likely to play the other one on the start of their turn. We might be able to make this work, though. It's going to be a bit of a risk. And notably this time, we do have only one of the Hunting Pack and only one of the Imperial Brigade, so that's fine. So I am going to go with playing this card first, and it does get more powerful the longer it goes unplayed, of course. But, as we were saying before, generally speaking, we're going to end up playing all of our cards in round 1, so I don't think there's any opportunity to save it here. Our opponent, if we don't play it, they're going to play it, so let's throw you down here, and in the range row, we will, not sure it matters too much which row we put this operative in. Let's put it there, and then I suppose, let's see, they could lock and create a copy of our leader here, so although I'm tempted to leave you on the opposing side and be the spy that we could use this ability on here, there's a chance that our opponent locks us and makes it so that we can't do that. I have had that happen to me before, and then suddenly we just gave them a free strength unit. I mean, it's not exactly free because, of course, they're using their leader ability to keep it, but it doesn't feel great when you're like, yeah, I just played my best card, and then suddenly they prevent you from taking full advantage of it, and actually they benefit from you using it. So, well, seems like they are thinking something pretty similar here. They played theirs in the range row, whereas we played ours in the melee row. I don't think that's going to make a huge difference here, but as we were expecting, they do in fact have what is, for the most part, an Assimilate deck here. This is an Assimilate unit, so is this, so is this, so is this, so is this, and these do set up more Assimilate. So I think we definitely want to play this because this is a spy, and therefore we can trigger that strong card that we had in our hand that we were wondering how best to trigger on our previous turn there. So this, the one downside is that, of course, it does create a copy of a card from our opponent's side of the playing field, a bronze card at that, so we'd only be able to make a copy of the operative on our side, and that's not terribly strong. So in some ways, depends how gritty we want to get. Ideally, we would wait a little bit longer. Or, hold on, what am I saying? Do this, make you into a spy, and then we'll use it on you. That's what we'll do. So that could have potentially been a good opportunity to use our leader ability there, because we know that our opponent has that really strong card that we want to use. However, one thing to note about this ability here, that again allows us to play a card out of our opponent's hand, is that it will only give us 3 options of cards to choose from. So right now there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cards in our, what was previously our opponent's hand. We would only have seen 3 of them, so there's only a 3 in 8 chance that we would have gotten this one here, which is the one we were looking for. So we will definitely play it here, because this is the setup we were looking for. It deals 2 damage, which is not a ton, but it allows us to play a copy of a card if we destroy it, or if it is a spy, then it automatically counts. So we did turn our opponent's Usurper Officer into a spy last time, which means we can play another one here, and sure, we'll also play it in the range row, and this time we will, yeah, we'll play it in the range row for the operative, and then bring it back, and we'll be good. The other thing to note is that that card that we just played does also have Echo, which means that at the beginning of the next round, it'll move from our graveyard to the top of our deck, so we will have the option to play it again in the next round. And it's a strong one, so we could be able to make good use of it. They played this card here, which gets boosted every time one of their opponents gains a status, and there are a few cards that can do that, notably the one that we played earlier that turned this guy into a spy. We also have units that will remove those statuses with Purify, which I don't think counts as adding a status, because it is removing a status. But, I don't know. Wording could maybe be such that it is technically still something that counts. Either way, though, now it is perhaps a little bit more justifiable to use the Duchess Informant, because we could play you, and you're much stronger than the operative, and yeah, we also have 1 Assimilate unit here, and that would get boosted from doing this, so I think we can justify this. Let's go for it. Play a copy of you, and shouldn't actually matter if we go melee or range row. So this is another card that will get boosted over time. Just, I would argue, probably not quite as much as these Assimilate units will. And our opponent does play one that we had in our starting hand. So I think at this stage, at least certainly once you have a fair number of Assimilate units out there, it is one of the best setup cards that we had. And they did lock the one that we created. But tell you the truth, I'm not too concerned about that, because yeah, it was going to get boosted over time, but as I said, I think that ultimately Assimilate will be better than getting boosted every time someone gains a status, but this card has Veil on it, which means it cannot gain any other statuses, so it was immune in that way. So I think we are probably looking to play more Assimilate units here, in which case I think we go for this one, because in addition to being 4 strength and Assimilate, it does deal 2 damage, so it is, technically speaking, our strongest Assimilate unit. And then the Impera Brigade is a 8 strength unit, likewise for the hunting pack here, because we will be able to summon the other card from our deck when we play it. So as we start to get later on in this round, then there's less time for Assimilate units to get boosted, and therefore those guys start to look like they could be preferable to Assimilate. So we may look to play them next time we have this hand. They are playing more of the Duchess's Informants, and as we were saying, that is quite good. And that is one of the cards that applies a status, so that will boost all 3 of their Thirsty Dames. So once you start to have that many of them, then it does start to become rather concerning. We could opt to lock one with the Hunter here, and it's not one of our stronger units in terms of raw power for ourselves, it's just that it's preventing our opponent from getting boosted further, and I'm just not sure that there's enough time remaining in the round for that to be a huge difference maker. We might just prefer to load up on more Assimilate ourselves, so I think we might go that route here. And we could Purify... Oh yes, tell you what, let's play this. Purify the unit that got locked, so now this will get boosted as well. And we can damage someone with 2 damage. I mean, if we could get rid of one of these Assimilate units altogether, that'd be fantastic. I don't think we're going to have enough damage to make that happen, though. And so we have a slight lead here, but we have played one more card than our opponent. So, a little bit misleading. They have, of course, used their leader ability. We have not. So we could theoretically opt to use it here and perhaps benefit from doing so. You removed the Veil on that card there, which means you could apply future statuses on it, but could have done that to just about anyone. My guess is you were just looking to play another Assimilate unit and figured, why not? Play the card that purifies and get rid of the Veil on this card here, even if you weren't going to do much about that. So now I think we may want to go Impera Brigade and Hunting Pack, because these guys, yes, do Assimilate. They will get boosted a little bit from that, but we only have 4 cards remaining here. And with us switching hands every turn, that means that you'll probably only get boosted twice at most, in which case you'll be 6 strength, whereas these guys are actually 8 strength, because we will play 1 here, and then draw the other from our deck and play it immediately. So I think that is better. And our lead here did technically increase. I believe we had less than a 10 strength lead at the end of our previous turn. And as we were saying before, well, that does apply a status. So it is another opportunity for those dames to get boosted. So that's another thing to consider is, even if something is the best card for you, you also do need to consider how strong is a card for your opponent. And so you might actually want to play a card that is not the best for you, but is so strong for your opponent that you want to make sure that they don't have the opportunity to play it. We could, of course, proceed to, once again, remove said lock, which we will proceed to do exactly that. So, means that, once again, our lead is actually growing here. It was a 10-point lead at the end of the previous round. Now it's 11. So we are improving in that regard. And the primary reason for that is that we have more Assimilate units than our opponent. That is why I wanted to make a point of playing a bunch of those at the beginning. Let's just do a quick count here. Is that actually true? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 Assimilate, whereas our opponent only has 1, 2, and they just played a third. So that means we're getting boosted by a little bit more each turn. Now we're going to deliberately do something other than playing the Assimilate units, because we did the maths and we confirmed that it is more effective to play these 8 strength cards at the end than it is to play the Assimilate units. And so once again, the lead grows a bit here. And so yes, they are playing Assimilate now, but at this stage, there's so little opportunity to boost them that that Assimilate and this Assimilate that we're about to play here is going to do next to nothing. It's basically just the base strength that you're getting out of it. In this case, it absolutely is just the base strength. But it does, since it's not from our starting deck, boost all of our other Assimilate units still, and means that, yes, we have a pretty large lead here. We could opt to use our leader ability, but I don't think we have any room to play a card from our opponent's hand. So I think we also have a large enough lead at this stage that that shouldn't be too much of a concern. I don't think this is going to be enough for our opponent to surpass us, so we will take round 1 here. And notably, our opponent used their leader ability, and we have not. So that means that not only did we win round 1, we have a pretty large advantage for round 2 or 3. And we do get this card back here, the card that plays a copy of a unit if it's a spy or if we take it out with the 2 damage. Which, if we have a reliable way of making sure that our opponent has spies, then great. This is the card that our opponent put in our deck, which is not great. This could be fantastic. Hold on. It plays 4 provision cost units, 2 4 provision cost units from our deck. Do we have enough of those to make that happen? Now we have 1, and if we get rid of you, then we'll have another. There we go. So now we play you, and this gives us 2 Assimilate units very early on. Normally, of course, you'd only be able to play 1 per turn. So this is great, but mostly for long rounds, because again, Assimilate, the longer the round, the more time you have to boost them. So it's not perfect in this set of circumstances, and also it does mean that we will be passing over Coup De Grace to our opponent, which is something we'd rather not do, but they won't necessarily have an obvious target for that ability there, because there are no spying units on our side, and there's no one with 2 or less strength, so they won't be able to take anyone out with it. This one boosts self by 1 for every spying enemy unit. We do not have any at the moment. When an enemy unit gains spying, boosts self by 1. Don't think anyone has any ways of applying that. However, our opponent did make us bleed, but I think that we are looking pretty good here, because of course just playing 2 units in our first turn means that we are off to a quick start here, and therefore I think we are likely going to find ourselves winning round 2 and maybe not even needing to use our leader ability to make it happen. There we saw that armor was a big difference there because, well, it had 2 armor and therefore actually dealt 0 damage to the unit. So we play this, and it is, well, okay, I guess this is a way of putting spying on our opponent after all, and therefore we will get boosted after all. So that does mean that we have a 13-point lead at the moment, and we could make a point of using our leader ability now. I suppose we know what's going to happen here. We already have this one locked down, but for the sake of using our ability, let's use it there, and now 20-point lead. We know exactly what card our opponent is going to play. It's going to be this one. There are no spying units with which to boost this guy, so it's just going to be 4 strength.
He's up to something.
And amounts to pretty comfortable victory there, after all. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what it can be like when you have 2 people who are both using Assimilate decks. I think ours was a little bit heavier on all the Assimilate stuff than our opponent's was. But it does mean that you have the potential to boost things a lot. So, let's try one more here. Okay, and so this time we'll be going against Nilfgaard. So, we may find that they're playing Assimilate units. We may find that they're doing something entirely different. As for what we have now, though, ooh. Already I see what looks like a very strong starting hand. Dandelion followed by Joachim de Wett. Does mean that we probably want to get rid of you because our opponent would proceed to very likely play you on their turn, and we don't really want that. Ooh, except you're also really good. I think I'd actually prefer, ideally it would be Dandelion, then you, but our opponent is likely to play you if we pass over this hand to you with this card in it. So, well, we gave them another strong card there. So, we'll just have to see how this one plays out here. Notably, our opponent is also using the lockdown ability, which means that we cannot use our double cross ability to play a card from their hand. They're going with a Doppler at the very beginning when it gets boosted by the number of cards in their hand that are a specific type of unit, and when you're playing it at the beginning, and it gets boosted by 9, that means that you have all the same type of unit. So, likely humans means they won't have very many, or at least they won't have any at the moment, in the way of special or tactic cards or artifacts. So, not sure that informs us too much, but at least good to have in the back of our head. So, I think our strategy is still the same, though. That is, play Dandelion.
With pleasure.
We will, of course, draw a card in the process, and don't think that changes anything here. And we will go for you, and you will allow us to play a copy of one of our starting units, and we could duplicate their Doppler. Don't necessarily think this is the best time to make that happen, though. Let's just get another Assimilate unit out there. Because, again, getting those out as soon as possible is preferable. And they do have some Duchess's informants of their own, and they are seemingly not going with Assimilate here, because I'm not seeing a single Assimilate unit. They do also have Impera Brigade. Okay. It's mostly lots of units that have order abilities and have a fair amount of damage dealing capability. So that is something to bear in mind, is these units that, at least at the moment on our side, are pretty low power, are vulnerable. And I'm thinking what we do here is that's a strong Assimilate unit that we would like to have on our side. So we could play Duchess's Informant here, trigger both of our Assimilates twice, because this card is first and foremost from our opponent's starting deck. So that's one trigger, and then this will be another, playing the Slave Hunter as well. So there's 1 and 2 triggers. And already we have built an early lead, and what with us having 3 Assimilate units to our opponent's 1, does mean that we should have more ability to grow going forward. Could also use Coup De Grace against the Duchess's Informant, and that would help to make this useful, because otherwise we're going to be struggling to find someone to use it against. They're, of course, playing exactly the same thing that we did last time. And perhaps they realize that we are about to do this here. So we will take you out, and in the process, allow us to play another version of that card. And we will play a copy of this card here. And in doing so, boost people. And we can now deal some damages. How would we like to do that? Well, we could outright remove a Slave Hunter, that would be amazing, but 2 damage is not going to be enough. And I don't think we're going to have, well, I would say I don't think we're going to have enough damage to pull that off in the future. However, remember, our opponent does have a lot of damage in their hand, so it might be possible. It might be possible. This deals 1 damage to an enemy unit, and then whenever an enemy unit gains spying, gain a charge. I think we've done most of our spying already, so that's unlikely to do more than just 1 damage. Anyone else who can deal damage? Same thing for you. This deals 2 upfront damage. And damage a random unit whenever we play a soldier. That seems like that's a little bit stronger. And admittedly, as I was looking at that, I was not seeing what our opponent was doing. But I noticed that they are playing a Duchess's Informant here. And using that to play a Slave Hunter of their own. What did you do? We played a card from our graveyard? We had one in our graveyard? I'm not sure I realized that we did, but okay. So, maybe you did destroy one earlier. Oh, with all the damage from the order abilities here, that might have been how you did it. If so, then well done, that's clever. But I think we will try to set a bit of that up ourselves. Playing something like this here. And we start off, I suppose actually dealing damage to you would be better at this stage. Because yes, that combo there is enough to take you out. That was the one that they just created, so it had not yet used its ability to deal damage, so also good for that reason. Take it out that early. And means that we have 1 fewer assimilate unit on our opponent's side to worry about. So they should have less ability to grow. But that is, as we were saying for ourselves earlier, strong 8 strength turn that they just took, and we could do that ourselves right here. But ideally, I think you do wait that one out a bit. The later you play it, the better, because it doesn't matter when you play these ones, but it does matter when you play the assimilate units. So we probably do want to do this as soon as possible. Let's play another one here. And it is the round of Slave Hunters, seemingly. Because we have, what? 3 on our side, 2 on our opponent's side. We've already lost one, they've already lost one. We are holding on to a slim lead here, and we played the same amount of units, so no card advantage to take into account here. We do have more assimilate units than our opponent, so we should be increasing by more each turn than they are. We also are dealing damage whenever we play a soldier, so long term we do have a better setup than they do. So that's encouraging.
I need not spill blood to make you suffer like
And I
never
don't think there's much that spying will do other than there is this card here that will deal damage, or at least gain a charge in order to deal damage whenever someone gains spying. And so I think at this stage, all spying is probably now off the table. So that might mean that it is actually preferable to go with one of these spotters here. There's a bit of a risk here that we get boosted based off of a weak card here, and it may not make a huge difference. Ultimately, I think we were a bit unfortunate there to get what was, yes, a weak card. So in hindsight, maybe it would have been better to go with something that could deal some damage so that we might have been able to take out this assimilate unit before it got the chance to get boosted out of control. And they will, of course, play that card themselves. And we would like to play this, yes. Question is, do we play it now, or do we get greedy and wait a turn first? Actually, same thing with the hunting pack as well. And I think, at this stage, yeah, let's play these, and then we'll leave some assimilate units for our opponent, and ultimately it's a bit of a trap for our opponent, basically giving them assimilate units at the very end when they aren't going to do much for them. Let's do this. This one plays the other card from our deck as long as our opponent has a unit with a status on it, and they do. And then, this time around, do we want to play one of these guys? Because I think it's another unit that the earlier you play it, the better. It really, I'm pretty darn sure, is no other opportunity at this stage to add spies. So, it is quite simply just 1 damage here. They could, of course, use that card to remove the Veil on their own card if they really wanted to. That could have made it possible for us to not be able to trigger these guys here, but we were a little too quick for them. Notably, they did get Knickers to join the battlefield from their deck. However, even with that, even though they've played one more card than us, we do still have an advantage here. So that is, again, an encouraging sign. This is a 7 strength unit, but does require that we boost an opponent's unit by 2. So on net, it's only 5. Means that there's a reasonable chance this might still be the best way to go. Of course, we're hoping that we get a better result than last time when we only got boosted by 3. This time, well, we get precisely what we got last time. But we do get all these Simulate units to trigger there. So we have a 10 strength lead. So that's still looking quite good here. And we do still have the ability to play Impera Brigade. Our opponent did not play that last turn. They've already played theirs, so perhaps they were thinking, well, it doesn't do me much good. But again, there might have been reason to play it just so that they were preventing us from doing so. We do, of course, have plenty of soldiers right now, so that's not a concern. We will definitely trigger it. Of course, though, it's from our starting deck, and therefore we're not triggering Assimilate there. But we're looking at a 15-point lead here with a reasonably powerful card to finish things off, and our opponent, even with that card there, has still not taken the lead, so we are fine here, and we can boost, take your pick. But there it is, round 1 victory. Of course, we do not have our leader ability because our opponent's leader ability is to cancel out all leader abilities. So we don't have that to fall back on, but we do at least have the comfort of knowing that we don't necessarily need to win round 2. We could fall back on round 3. We do have the portal here, and that has been a bit of a game changer for us. Let's just make sure that we have enough 4 provision cost units to take advantage of it. And yes, these are both 4 provision costs, so we could summon 2 units. This is as well. So yes, that's looking very good for us. So we probably keep this. Do we have someone to use Coup De Grace on? Potentially with Duchess's Informant. But remember, we aren't going to be able to play all these cards ourselves. Our opponent's going to play one of them. So I think that we probably do go this route here. Of course, this could have also been a setup for this. But yeah, I think we leave it with this. Maybe even get greedy and try swapping that out. Okay. So Portal definitely goes first. Let's play that. That gives us 2 Assimilate units. And when our opponent gets our hand, they will also be able to play an Assimilate unit with the same base strength as at least this one here. Oh, they also have a portal? What? Alright, what do they have, though? Let's see. What are you creating with this? Okay. Whoa. So, almost exactly the same as us. Notably, we had 1 Ducal Guard, whereas they had 2 Art of Feainn heavy cavalries. And that means we had 1 more strength coming out of these guys than they did, but they also had a Roach get summoned from their deck, which we, of course, did not have, and therefore does mean that it is likely that could be the difference maker they were looking for. This card will, of course, trigger Assimilate for both of our units, but it is spawning a base copy of this unit, not playing a base copy of this unit, which means it only triggers it once, not twice. If it were triggering Assimilate twice, then we might have been in business. But I think that in all likelihood, we're going to find that we are tied here. And then, ooh, hold on. This is going to be close. This will be 4 strength, yes. And then when they play that card, it will be 6 strength on their side. So yes, they will win this round here. And sure, we'll make someone a spy. Make it Roach. But like I was saying, having the victory in round 1 is, of course, big. Because that means that we don't necessarily need to win this round. And because this will create a copy of itself, does mean that they will take round 2 here. So it'll be down to the wire. What will we have? Ultimately, will come down to whatever we end up drawing here. No leader ability to give us an advantage here. So we're looking for something big, and we did get it. And we probably do want to make a point of immediately bringing back the units that we create on the opposing side when we summon those operatives. Other than that, what do we want? We could deliberately keep Duchess's Informant because they're not going to be able to do much with it when we have 1 legendary unit here and a couple of operatives that are not very strong. So, could deliberately stick with this. Ooh. No, let's not do that. Okay, well, that's also a really strong unit. So this is a little bit difficult here because that's a strong unit, yes. It allows them to play 1 Assimilate unit and then create a 1 power copy of potentially another Assimilate unit, which is exactly what they're doing here. It's very good for long rounds because that's a lot of early assimilate to get boosted, but in a short round like this, maybe not as much so. And the tricky thing is here, we're going to be able to play one very powerful card, yes, but our opponent is also going to be able to play one very powerful card. So ideally, we would have had only one good one and then made sure that we're passing over a few weak things to our opponent. So that's not great. We do need to choose, do we want to have the Usurper General on our side, or do we want to have Joachim de Wett on our side, because our opponent's going to use the other one. So this would trigger their assimilate once a piece. This would trigger it just once a piece as well. Okay, so I think this is... I think we go for you. Couldn't make a case for either. Let's bring back the units immediately. It's 4 strength on the opposing side, and then boost a card from your deck by 8. So boosting a card from your deck by 8 is, of course, very intriguing, but the fact that you're also playing a 4 strength card on the opposing side, there's something to be said for that. Now, of course, they are still going to play it, and ultimately, it's going to be really important which card they get here, and it's not a terribly strong one, but we do have statuses, so this could mean that they play another hunting pack. No, they've already done so, or it's in their graveyard or something like that, or it's in their hand. So we got off a little bit easy there. That could have been a fair bit worse than it was. We could play our own hunting pack here, or... Oh, no. This is their other hunting pack. It's in their hand right now. So, do we have a hunting pack to bring back with this one? No. So this is pretty useless for us, and it will be for them as well. This is worth only 4 strength, whereas this has 7 and then boosts our opponent by 2. So on net, it's worth 5. So this is slightly better than our opponent's card. So let's go with this one. And then we'll boost you. Sure. And so we do have a 3 strength advantage here. And they will be playing a 4 strength card, bringing them to 24. That is their own card, so it's not going to trigger assimilate. This will play a card on their side with 1 strength, so that's not great, of course, but by playing one of their own cards here, and we should play one that has just higher base strengths, that would be the hunting pack, whereas this one only has 3 base strength. That will be enough for us to just barely pull out the victory there. So, that is the kind of tense match that you can have when you have 2 assimilate decks going against each other, because there is so much game theory of trying to anticipate what is this opponent going to play next turn, because it's a lot of, well, I'd love to wait to play this card at the ideal time, but if I do that, then in all likelihood my opponent's going to jump in and steal it for themselves, and we saw a bit of that this time around, and ultimately we were still able to walk away with the victory, but that gives you a sense as to what it's like to play with a deck that is specifically designed for this new Switcheroo event. So if you have not yet tried to use an assimilate deck in Switcheroo, then I highly recommend that you do so, because, well, you can find some chaotic matches, kind of like that one there. So with that, I'll catch you guys next time.